So we just watched Keir Starmer's address to the nation after the riots have continued today, largely due to his stupid speech yesterday where he basically drew a line in the sand and then took a side. Now in his speech today, he spent his time talking about far-right elements, the violence on the street, thuggery, damage to private property, and how he intends to bring justice to any rioters. And fair enough, if people have been beating people up for their skin colour or ripping down private property and rioting, fine, let them feel the full force of the law. Yet the key problem here is exactly the same as yesterday. He hasn't even acknowledged that some of the people on the street are not far right. They're concerned about the future of their country and their children. Now Starmer here either fails to understand what's fundamentally going on here, is frightened of the liberal media if he says there's two sides to every story and this is nuanced, or thirdly, this is a political strategy. It just seems utterly bizarre that he stated these riots, whatever their apparent cause, and then went on to speak about how Muslims have a right to be safe in the country. Fine, Muslims have a right to be safe, but remember many people are out on the streets here because children have been murdered, something he didn't even mention in his speech. In fact, there was no mention at all of the legitimate concerns of millions of British people up and down the country with regards to mass migration and the safety especially of children, but the general public too. This either means that Starmer doesn't think this is relevant at all, or he's actually playing the political strategy I mentioned earlier. And remember, the Blairite mission, according to Andrew Nether, a speechwriter for New Labour, was to open the gates to mass immigration in order to rub the right's nose in diversity and render their arguments out of date. Why I'm raising this is because on the right at the moment there are some major questions which are highly legitimate that need answers. However, if Starmer can make legitimate concerns about mass migration come under the banner of far-right riots, then essentially he renders all of those points extreme. And as I say, if people are out there calling wanton violence and attacking people for no reason, then by all means let them feel the full force of the law. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a major question around the Southport stabbings and the plethora of other issues we've experienced like it. That Starmer is not even willing to address any of these is extremely alarming for the future. Now I think a concern of many here is that Starmer and the Labour Party and now the police seem to be incapable of dividing between those people who are protesting a legitimate cause and those people that are out just to cause trouble. Further still, we've seen the so-called Muslim Defence League carrying weapons around and engaging in quite extreme violence themselves. Starmer hasn't even mentioned any of that. And just like yesterday, Starmer is now running the risk of fanning the flames even further, of course. On top of that, he's spoken about misinformation online, and there is much misinformation online, especially on Twitter. But given Starmer's track record, do you think he's going to be even-handed, nuanced and logical when looking at information online? Now I hope I'm wrong, but part of me thinks that Starmer may use these riots as an excuse to clamp down on any centrist and rightist media that disagrees with him, even if they disagree with the riots. We've already seen the mainstream media be taken over pretty much completely by the ideology of globalist liberalism. So how long could it be before they want to do that to the online space too? And just as another quick note, Rishi Sunak has come out to condemn the behaviour, but he wrote on Twitter that the violence has nothing to do with the tragedy in Southport. This is one of these weird modern day political statements that you get. Of course it had something to do with the Southport stabbings. That's what started the whole thing off. It's like when they say an Islamic terrorist attack had nothing to do with Islam. And you think, well, you can say it's got nothing to do with mainstream Islam if you like, or you don't believe most Muslims believe that, but nothing to do with Islam at all? That's just insane. And while we're talking of Islam, Starmer also announced that mosques are to get a new rapid response security team. Funny he can't do that when our children are being murdered, isn't it? So while Starmer talks about people being divisive, he is dividing people like never before. Anyway, these are just some of my thoughts. Do let me know what you think down below. And do consider subscribing to the channel.